Welcome to Strange Adventures, I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about Children of the Blood, which is a new Vampire 5th edition book, which adds in a bunch of cultists, some new merits and flaws, and lots of other stuff. I think the best way to talk about this is to do a top 5 things that you should steal from this book. You, as my community, have voted overwhelmingly for this video over some others, but don't worry, I'm sure there will be others eventually in the future. Thank you for voting. It makes my life easier and my brain clearer when I know what I'm gonna do that week. Anyway, Cult of the Blood Gods was an amazing release that I should talk about at some point. It talks about, obviously, cults of vampires, cults of people that believe in various myths about the vampires. It's a really good book, which I haven't talked about, but this, Children of the Blood, is a supplementary book to that, in which it creates more NPCs and more things to incorporate in stories. This one was released by Onyx Path, and actually, if you put money into the Kickstarter for Cult of the Blood Gods, then you should have access to it. I'm not sure what tiers and stuff get it, but it's full. This is a full up book, mostly of characters. If that's what you're looking for, the number one thing you should steal from this book is Landon Dankworth. Bwah, bwah, bwah. Landon Dankworth is a really fascinating character for me because he's not your usual cult leader, and he also covers themes that I find interesting that are politically important at the moment, because he is a far-right, basically internet troll who leads a cult full of people that he doesn't know what the internet is, but they spread his stuff through Facebook memes and stuff. Also, just because he's a thin blood doesn't mean you can't have a cult. That's aspirational right there. No, not that only 1,000-year-old vampires have cults around their personality. His story's beautiful. He accidentally finds his way to getting turned into a vampire. He accidentally falls into being a person that people really want to listen to, and he, espouses some really unpleasant prejudices that against all sorts of people. Like, if that's something you want to include in your game, then great. But I think my favorite part of this character is the vampire bot. The idea that this character might not even exist at all. They might just be a meme or a bot or some sort of bot network of hackers that just want to influence people towards far right and fascist ideologies. It's pretty deep cut for modern politics, and I really enjoy it. It's got a little cutout here about playing with prejudice and the fact that because it cuts so close to modern stuff that might trigger people, then you probably want to ask your players before including a character like this, and you can still use them. Still use the dude. He has all sorts of wonderful misguided pride aspects to him, and obviously he is basically the controller of a cult, which is always a fun group to go up against as an antagonist. I think Dankworth right here is the perfect antagonist for any situation. Number 2 thing that you should steal is the Nosferatu from this book. I have read that this book includes some characters that come from previous editions of the game and some new ones as well, but I don't know who they are because I don't recognize any of them, to be honest. And if Gloria Flores Gums is one of those, along with where is she? Belinda Buke, the creepy Nosferatu, I just like the aesthetics are quite important to a Nosferatu. You want to be creepy, you want to be sneaky in some way, and I think both Belinda and Gums over here have an equal and opposite version of that look, wherein Gloria used to be beautiful and then was turned, and she had a talent for makeup and still wants to do makeup on people like vampires so that she can continue her passion. And obviously her own looks are slightly different now, but she still has that incredible deep lipstick and, pointy teeth, which I think is a classic look. But on the other hand, this is something that I hadn't considered. Putting your Nosferatu in the uncanny valley instead of in the monster category is an equally valid way of making them look hideous. Belinda has no pores. She is doll-like. She doesn't smile. There is something off-putting about being in her presence that is clearly monstrous, or at the very least unsettling to people, that, in the same way as Max from Stitch of Fate has like a bat face. They're both risks to the very existence of vampires being exposed, which is really cool. Also, she has a whole bunch of poems that she reads to people, and because of her expressionless face, it makes it difficult for people to understand the expressions behind them, which I think these characters are really cool. They've written up so much stuff about every single character. I can't physically go into this, but I think these Nosferatu are probably my favorite characters out of here. I don't know, it's a close call, but I would say any of the characters from this, you've got NPCs for every occasion, and they're all cultists. Like, they all believe. I just remembered Zhao Jenny Guang. She's my favorite, actually, because she's the traveling researcher for the Church of Cain, which I find fascinating, and I think that's really cool, and all her story stuff is really awesome. I like her the best. There's so much stuff in here that you can steal and change and adapt to your thing. I will say none of them really fit together as a cohesive whole. I think that's not really what they're for. They're just to kind of pick and choose your favorites, where normally I would prefer to buy a book to have it and then use it later if I'm referencing it for storytelling or something. This is more of a piecemeal kind of book, and it makes it harder to recommend. But if you do find any interesting stories and people reference this, Children of the Blood, and I guess if you've got Cults of the Blood Gods, then it's easier to recommend. But yeah, I'm sure you'll find a character in here that you like. They're all very cool. There's lots of Ventru, who I enjoy being creepy, and they've also got like blood sorcery in here because they're part of the Church of Cain, and they have like their own rituals, which you can find in Cults of the Blood Gods, which is why it's important for that book to be in your collection first. So, number 3 thing, this was a list, did you forget? Number 3 thing that you should steal from this book. This one bit here. Background refinement, influence for the church. I don't know why they put it here. It's in a weird place. It's in a strange thing. It's in about coterie types, so groups of vampires and the things that you can give them, and like missions and extra bonus resources that you can give them. For some reason, this is at the back of that bit, which sort of makes sense, but also there's an entire section called advantages, which is sort of what that is, and now I've got to find that bit again. Here it is. I really like the way they've written this. So normally influence is your character having a specific industry or sphere of influence within which they can very easily, or if you take a floor, I guess, less easily, just swim through and get what they want from them and make them do things. And that's cool. I really like that. But the way they've written merits and flaws in this book is a little different from the core book. It's a little less broad in the kinds of influence that you get. So for instance, I think you should rip this off wholesale, obviously, to use for how much influence that your characters want in the church, if they want any. But I think the most interesting thing is that normally for these merits and flaws, it says you can have an increasingly large influence or amount of people that would listen to you, or the kind of project that you can initiate in the church or wherever is larger the more dots you have. So 1, 2, 3 to 5 all have varying levels of stuff that you can do for it. But they've written it a bit more specifically in this. So mortal worshippers roused to public protest on or kindred raised to hunt a heretic is a thing you can do with a devout following. They've given you negatives to dice pools for influencing certain people. You are more likely to end up with an adversary if you are 5 dots in and like the next leader of the church wants you to take their place. Saying that once per story you can call in a favor for a stay of execution or similar forgiveness is an interesting, specific ability that your character now has thanks to these 4 dots of influence in the church. And I like this because not only do you have a well-integrated network of informants in the church or whatever, you also have a thing that you can do to kind of focus your character on providing a service or being called on to ask for something in exchange with another vampire. Like, these give slightly more solid hooks as to what your character will be doing, which I think is useful to help with roleplay, because when you're like, I have 5 dots in resources, what does that mean? Am I the richest person in the world? I have 5 dots in influence in the underground. Does that just mean that I can kill off any mook I want? Like, or can I organize a heist on the fuck's that place with all the money called? A bank. Fort Knox, that's it. So more specifically, the thing I really want to steal from this way of writing is not only giving your characters things like influence, but also underneath that, just writing like, once per story, you can have a free meal at this bar, or for instance, once per story, you can get an extra 3 dice on a roll to influence or intimidate or seduce or something like that within this sphere of influence, or whatever background you're giving to your players. I really like that. And some of the writing in this book is made like that in a way I really like, and some is in a way I don't like, but we'll get onto that. Number 4 thing that you should steal from this book is Marcus Vitel's kindred. He has a bunch of vampires that mention him as an influence, or someone that they hate, or someone that they love the ideas of. And I had not read into that kind of La Sombra character, Marcus Sejanus Vitellius, who is apparently in 5th edition, I don't know what they're like in previous editions, an influential and powerful vampire in America who wants to unite all vampires together and under their rule, obviously. I think that's a really cool motivation. It's a very interesting hook for a story as a whole. And having all of these characters like Faith Corrigan, Jenny, and Misery here, or Sombra, who I think hates him? I don't know. I can't remember. I think it is Misery because she was originally, she was sired by Marcus, who treated her like livestock and like chattel. She was traded between various vampires and she hated it, and then she broke out of it, which is a very interesting story for her. And just having these, where are they? The comparative minds of the night are Sejanus's followers, who are trying to think up ways to unite the powers and the factions of the vampires to try and make them work together for a better future. And these highly intellectual characters here are all working towards their own ends. And I'll be honest, I have never found any of these coterie group parts of the game useful. If you have, feel free to disagree with me in the comments and let me know how you've used them. But I tend not to use these because I tried once and it became very complicated and then I gave up. I just enjoy the idea of a super old vampire not wanting to use their powers to manipulate in a normal way, but having a grand vision. And I like that. It's just cool. And giving coteries lore sheets is a good idea as well, to kind of ground them in the world, because these particular vampires all have a cult-like organization, which makes them a bit more flavorful when they have connections to things like the Inquisition, a blood network, and the history of the vampires, which they can then go out and use, and also like a relic that is useful for their purpose, which is a stone that translates things. Like, it's a really simple magical item that kind of ties this group together. And I think this partially comes from the section of Cults of the Blood Gods where it tells you how to build a coterie, but like I say, I'm not at a point where I can give a review on that book, and I certainly haven't read that much of that section. So this particular coterie I really like, and you should give a go. Number 5 thing that I think you should steal is all of these merits and flaws. And that is because they are only useful in certain circumstances, and that circumstance is if you've got a cult in your game, if you're playing characters with cults, if you're playing religious characters. That's basically what this book is about. But I think that they can be manipulated to basically anything you want. So it specifies how they imagine that you'll use them, but like, you don't have to be part of the Ashfinders cult to be an influencer. You certainly don't have to be part of the Church of Set to be vigilant. And actually, as an aside, this one's kind of weird because it's like, if you succeed on a wits awareness roll, it allows you to detect a personal thing keeping you under watch, which is a role that I would allow any character, whether or not they had this. But I suppose it also gives you the idea that you're being watched even when you fail, which I don't know. It's awareness tests are like this big thing that people do and don't use in interesting and weird and sometimes bad ways that I have opinions on anyway. So how about we just move on? Say, take a look at Gematria. It's a coded language of numbers, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, for a particular cult, which is cool and interesting. And like, Bullslayer gives you specific attributes. You get re-rolls on if you're undertaking a specific task that your character has set their mind to. I love some aspects of all of these merits, but like, I don't like the set dressing, which is fine. Like, it's good and useful content, but it also means that I can't necessarily fully tell you to go out and get this book if you're into 5th edition, because it's not super necessary unless you're looking for hooks. Like, I guess that's what the beautiful thing about these is. These are all story hooks instead of tools for your character, or at least that's the way I see it. If your character is an influencer, you have more social media attention, and that can lead into a story. If your character has something from the core book, it's written differently there, so it encourages a slightly different way of thinking of, like, you have influence as a tool. No, it's got specific once per story abilities that you can call on if you've got this stuff. To summarize, this isn't a bad book by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a book that you will need Cults of the Blood Gods mostly if you want to make good use of this. And it's probably best for like a bloodline if you want to add that into your Hecata characters, like some really fascinating families like the Rossellini and the Milliner families for Hecata, which I think is really cool. You read their stories and you'll find it fascinating, like I do, I'm sure. But on the other hand, unless you've got a cult in your unless you've got a cult in your coterie, then you will probably not find it useful. It's one of those things. But if you want to see me talk about Cult of the Blood Gods, let me know your opinions in the comments, and I will hopefully make a review of it sometime in the near future, because it is a really great book, and I do want to talk about it in depth. But it's massive, so it'll be a really long video. So let me know that that's something you'd actually watch. Are you gonna get this book? Is it something you've read? I would love to hear your opinions in the comments as usual, and I will chat with you there. But until next time, don't forget to subscribe for more vampire and role-playing content. But until next time, goodbye.